are at extreme risk for vitamin D deficiency because of the natural sunscreen in the pigmentation of their skin.
当一个皮肤略黑的人居住的越北上呢，因为他们皮肤黑色素摄取的缘故呢，他们更有可能。
We see the same pattern virtually everywhere.
全世界哪里都一样。
Here's a study done in New Zealand.
这个是新西兰的一个实验。
And this study, the cutoff point was even lower. It was at 50 nanomoles per liter with a deficiency level less than 25. Now, what I mean by that is vitamin D insufficiency means that you don't have enough for good health. But when you hit that second point, it means that you're very likely to get ill with a vitamin D-related deficient disease.
在新西兰的少于50个单位的呢，已经代表是维生素 D 不足。但是你看看，如果是少于那些25个单位的呢，它的情况呢会非常的严重的。
This study was done, I think, in Wellington Hospital in New Zealand. It showed that 87% of the pregnant women coming in didn't have enough vitamin D for good health. If they're vitamin D deficient, what about the baby they're carrying?
你看，这个是在一个医院全部孕妇所做的一个实验，有87%的孕妇呢，她们竟然维生素 D 不足，她们的胎儿骨骼形状会怎么样？
But what was really worrying was the fact that 61% of them were actually deficient, which meant that there was pathological deformations in bone formation and other cellular functions. And this was showing up in an increased incidence of rickets in the Wellington area in New Zealand. This is only a few years ago.
这个61%的孕妇真的让人很困扰，因为呢，他们在威灵顿这个地带呢，他们所 carry 的宝宝呢，他们都有完整的情况。
Vitamin D deficiency strikes 1/3 of all Australians.
澳大利亚人有1/3呢是维生素 D 不足的。
Almost 3/4 of them have insufficient levels for good health.
1/3呢不足以维生素 D 来维持一个良好的健康。
Now, this study was a very recent study, just came out this year. I'm going to jump over some of the stuff there. I'm going to move down to the bottom where it talks about obesity because this is an interesting finding.
这是一个很新的一个临床实验，而我会给大家看看最后一个要点，就是人们的吃肥。
Two things that this study found. Number one, the level of deficiency or the prevalence of deficiency increases with age, which substantiates other findings that as we get older, the ability of our bodies to manufacture vitamin D begins to wane.
第一项证据显示，人们越老呢，吃肥的情况会越严重，而它是指向着你越老呢，越难生维生素 D， 越难制造维生素 D。
The other interesting thing about this study was that those individuals, be they children or adults, if they were overweight or obese, their level of vitamin D deficiency was significantly higher.
第二个证据显示，不管你是男女老少呢，只要你是吃肥的话呢，你的维生素 D 含量呢就会不足的。
The study showed that obesity and the level of physical activity virtually doubled the risk of vitamin D deficiency in these populations.
吃肥缺乏运动呢，会提高2倍维生素 D 不足的风险。
How many are going to get out for a run tomorrow morning?
谁起来跑步了？刚才
All right. Let's have a look at another study. This is an osteoporosis a couple of years ago.
这个也是几年前的骨骼疏松症的一个临床实验。
Okay, getting closer to home here. The prevalence of vitamin D insufficiency in postmenopausal Asian women. Study done, reported in osteoporosis back in 2009.
2009年，更年期后女性维生素 D 不足的情况就如下。
Again, the cutoff point being the magic number of 75. What we see is that in Thailand, 47% of postmenopausal women in Thailand were vitamin D insufficient.
还是以这个75点呢来做一个标准，47%的泰国女性呢，更年期后的泰国女性呢，有维生素 D 不足的情况。
And in Malaysia,
马来西亚呢
49%.
49%。
When you go slightly northward, it jumps significantly. In Japan, 90% of the postmenopausal women in that study showed vitamin D insufficiency, and in Korea, 92%.
那你稍微的往北移的国家呢，你看看日本和韩国呢，92%的人呢维生素 D 不足。
sorry. Again, what that is showing is latitude equals risk.
再次证明呢，越高纬度越高，越北呢风险越大。
But that doesn't mean that people in Malaysia or Singapore should be contrite about it, because those levels of deficiency for an area in the tropics are unusually high.
你们在新加坡或在马来西亚也不要太心急或者太放松哦，因为在热带国呢，我们的比例和发现率呢也是相当的惊人的。
Here is another study. It's hard to see at the bottom there, but it's a study in clinical chemistry done a couple of years ago. And this study was done in the Singapore-Malaysia area. And what it showed was that a very high prevalence of insufficiency in vitamin D among Malaysian children.
在几年前的新国和马国的这个实验呢，显示马国和新国的儿童呢都已经有维生素 D 不足的情况了。
The study also indicated, reported an increased incidence in the level of rickets in that population.
软骨症的并发症呢也越来越多。
When you look at in Malaysia, the Ministry of Health recommendations in Malaysia for the daily intake of vitamin D are inordinately low.
马国的卫生部所建议的每日维生素 D 摄入量呢是很奇怪的低啊。
And I think in light of the new scientific evidence on the need for increased intake, the government of Malaysia has to look very, very seriously at significantly increasing that recommendation for daily intake.
在这样多证据的显示之下呢，我觉得马国政府是有必要呢，把这个维生素 D 的每日建议使用量给提高。
The other worrying trend that was picked up in this study was that a very significant number of young people, well, people of all ages really, from 20 to 82, were vitamin D deficient, which means that their levels were seriously low.
在这个让人困扰呢，我发现到有一个年龄层呢，他们的维生素 D 是特别的低。
Here's a study done in one of your local hospitals. This was reported just a couple of years ago. The median age of the population sampled in this study was 42.
而这个也是在几年前呢，我国本地城都城医院的一个临床实验，平均中位龄就是42岁。
The blue bar shows frank deficiency. The green bar indicates the level of insufficiency.
蓝色代表不足，绿色代表呢不足的情况略为严重。
And we can see that although all the levels are fairly high, individuals, men and women in the Chinese population are in better shape. The level of frank deficiency was lower. In the Malaysian population, that begins to climb. And in the population, the Indian populations, but particularly the females, the level of deficiency is over 80% in that population.
虽然结果旗鼓相当，但是我们看看华人、马来朋友和印度朋友呢，还是会发现到印度朋友的维生素 D 不足呢，会比较高，8成以上。
Now, the question you have to ask is why?
为什么？
Here you are, what, 2-3 degrees above the equator? You get lots of sunlight, strong sunlight, if you get out in there. Why are people so deficient? Lifestyle. People are staying indoors, they're avoiding the sun, they're not getting out unexposed. If they're getting out in the sun, they're slathering on that sunscreen. I know a lot of women don't like to get a tan, they like to be fairer complexion, and so they're avoiding that strong sunlight. They're actually significantly increasing the risk of a degenerative disease such as osteoporosis, heart disease, cancer down the road. You've got to get out in the sun, you've got to get that vitamin D.
很奇怪，为什么在新加坡、马来西亚那么阳光那么强的国家呢，也有那么多人维生素 D 不足呢？我要看看呢，都是因为我们人们的生活起居习惯，还有呢没有补充营养补充的营养。
Those bars are quite alarming figures. When you look at it, it shouldn't be that high. But it doesn't matter where you are. I spoke 2 weeks ago in Mexico. And in Mexico, they have the same problem. it's even a little bit worse because the level of obesity in Mexico is quite a bit more so than here. So we see a lot of Mexican children that are at significant risk for disease formation because they're so low in vitamin D.
虽然这个图表已经告诉我们很惊讶的一个结果呢，那我2周前在墨西哥所演讲的时候呢，发现墨西哥的情况会较为严重。为什么呢？因为他们的吃肥的这个情况呢，会比我们这边来的更严重。
Here's another one: the vitamin D status of children in Kuala Lumpur. This was brought out just last year. We look at 3 levels. We look at this level. Whoa, wrong button again. Here we go. We look at this level here, which is above that cutoff point. So 28% of these children, 28% of the population of children in Kuala Lumpur are in pretty good shape. The vitamin D levels are okay. 37% are insufficient, but a very alarming 35%, over a third of the childhood population in Kuala Lumpur are showing frank vitamin D deficiency. These kids are going to get sick.
这个很新的实验代表，在吉隆坡呢，有30%的儿童有足够的维生素 D， 那么有超过1/3，35%竟然很严重的缺乏维生素 D， 而这一群的儿童呢，都会有很多的情况的复杂症。
The solution to this is simple. Number 1, awareness. You got to be aware of the fact that the sun is good for you. Number 2, you got to get out in it. Number 3, you've got to supplement. Even though you may feel you're getting enough exposure, I think that extra protection by making sure that you get enough vitamin D through good supplementation is extremely important insurance for you to take.
其实要改善这个情况很简单的，第一要了解太阳和维生素 D 的重要性，第二改变，第三呢就是服食营养补充品了。
Let's just go through some of this. Again, this is a study released in the Asian Pacific Clinical Journal of Clinical Nutrition. What this study showed, and this was a few years back, 2004, it compared Malaysian and Chinese women, average age about 59, 60 years of age. What they found is the level of vitamin D was quite a bit lower in the Malaysian women than in the Chinese women population. Whether it's lifestyle or what, they're not really sure, but that there was a significant discrepancy. Higher body fat, a higher body mass index of the Malaysian population is likely a factor at play here.
我妇女呢，跟年轻妇女所维生素 D 不足的情况呢，当跟普罗大众的华人女性比的时候呢，她们会比较严重。我在这个